Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Gary Stotler. Gary has an awesome story and is doing some amazing work, so I'm excited to have him on to share his story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. The Unlock Wellness podcast is now on patreon.com. Patreon is an amazing site that allows you to support your favorite podcasts. So whether it's $1 per month or 10 or 20, it's an amazing way to help support the Unlock Wellness podcast. But if you're unable to support at this time, I still love you. The podcast will always be free. But the podcast has been growing a lot, and using Patreon will help me slowly improve recording equipment so I can get you guys the best sound quality possible, as well as help decrease the need to use sponsored ads in the episodes. And I'm definitely not against sponsorships by any means, but I do respect your time as listeners, and I don't want to have to overload the podcast with a bunch of ads. So if you do want to support using Patreon, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson. There are even fun incentives for supporting, like shirts and stickers, so be sure to check it out. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drkaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Gary Stotler. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Gary Stotler, and Gary's story is amazing. Since 2013, Gary has gone from 400 pounds to being a 100-mile ultra runner finisher. And he is determined to let his actions show people what is possible and hopes to help you outrun your excuses. So, Gary, just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm extremely excited to have you.
No problem. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. And, Gary, we'll just kind of jump into it, just walk everybody through your backstory. So, first off, where you're from and what your health and wellness look like at a younger age.
So I grew up in Wyoming for the better part of my life. And just recently I moved down to Denver, and I'm loving that, by the way. Colorado is just an amazing place. So kind of starting from the beginning, I guess, I've been overweight pretty much my entire life. In seventh grade, I weighed 215 pounds for my football physical, and graduated high school somewhere around 275, 300 pounds. And, I played sports. I played, football, and I wrestled. I played baseball. I did track, like shot and put, but I was always that big. I was never a great athlete. It was just, I've always enjoyed sports. So it was something that I did. And then after high school, I went to college, and I started drinking more beer and partying. I partied for 7 years, and then after college, I became a car salesman. And that's not the healthiest lifestyle, eating fast food, because you only have 10 minutes for lunch, and it's a pretty stressful job. So you hit the bottle of booze pretty hard, and one thing led to another. And I stepped on the scale at 400 pounds in 2013.
Man, yeah, that's crazy. And growing up though, Gary, did you grow up in a family that was pretty common to be on the heavier side, or were you just kind of eating a lot because you were dealing with a lot of stuff emotionally? What kind of I guess kind of triggered the weight gain for you as a young kid?
Yes, all of the above. I know that's a general answer, and it's taken me a long time to get there. But everyone in my family is bigger. I don't know if I'd call them obese, but they're just, they're bigger. So I always thought that, I was just destined to be a big kid. I didn't know about healthy food, and I know this is silly as can be, but I used to think that a Coca-Cola was healthy because there was no fat in it, and it just wasn't an understanding. It wasn't a focus in my family that nutrition, eating food was an event. I mean, think my mom always made sure that there was enough food for the whole neighborhood, and everyone always we made sure that we were fed well. I mean, we weren't, by all means, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and everything wasn't. We didn't live in a big house or anything like that, but there was always food on our table, and there was always enough food on our table. So it was, you eat until you're full, and being a big kid, I always wanted to play football, so you always ate to be as big as you could, and we ate meat and potatoes, and you drank whole milk, and that's the way that I grew up. And then of course I liked candy. I still to this day I love sweets, and I just didn't. I guess I didn't know any better to try to control myself around all that stuff when I was growing up.
Right. Did you have any like health issues or anything like that? Like, I mean, as far as like diabetes or you were sick a lot or just anything like that?
Not that I can really remember. In seventh, eighth grade, somewhere around there, I was diagnosed with athletically induced asthma. And the more that I look back at that, I think I was just overweight, and I wasn't healthy. And so when you're not, when you're exercising and you're not healthy, you have a hard time breathing. It's just
Right.
it's science. So they came up with this whole athletically induced asthma, and I used that as a crutch for a little while. But I had one asthma attack. They diagnosed me with that, and then I never had another one. And now I'm on the trails for 4, 5, 6 hours, and I've never had another asthma attack. So I truly think that they just put a label on me that instead of telling me that I should get healthy, it was just easier to say you have asthma, and we'll call it a day.
Right. Man, that's crazy. So, I mean, so you get to 400 pounds. I mean, like when you stepped on the scale and you saw that, I mean, what's going through your mind? Are you, I mean, what's your, what's your thought process like at that point?
That morning scared the fucking shit out of me, to the point where I literally was so scared for my life. It was 4 days before my son's fourth birthday. I saw 397 pounds on the scale, and I was scared because every male in my family has died early from some sort of heart disease, and I was more obese than anyone in my family has ever been. So I knew that I was on a fast track to a heart attack by the time I was 35 years old, and there was nothing. I could see no foreseeable future that didn't end up with me in a grave before my kids graduated high school.
Did you have like hope though? Like, I know you're thinking about all of this at one time. Like, did you have hope that you could turn it around, or was it just more like fear? This is where I'm at. Just, I mean, just straight fear.
That's a great question. I never really looked at it as hope of turning it around. I just looked at it as I was so scared. I didn't know what to do or how I was going to do it. I just knew I needed to do something. And I literally, like, I stepped on the scale, and a million things went through my head in a half a second. And I walked out of the bathroom, and I told my wife at the time, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm never, ever, ever going to feel this way again. And so I guess my only hope was that something was going to happen, and I had no idea what. My original goal was to lose 20 pounds. And now that I look back, I'm like, 20 pounds, losing 20 pounds at 400 pounds really isn't going to do anything. But it was something achievable because I'd lost 20 pounds a million times. I mean, granted, the fact I lost 20 pounds and gained 30 is a different story, but I knew that 20 pounds was an achievable goal, and it was something that I could see. It was something tangible that I could feel, and it wasn't overwhelming, and it wasn't like reaching for the stars. It was just, I got to do something, and this is the first step that I can do.
Right. So what's the first, like, what are the actions that finally do come to you once you start to think, of just different tactics you can take to lose those 20 pounds?
So I guess I have to preface this whole thing. I spent 5 years reading about success, reading about making money, reading about business, just to make a living. I mean, I had discovered that business was something that I was completely interested in, and personal development was something I was very interested in. And I'd never put two and two together that I had to be healthy to be able to work as much as I needed to and work how I needed to. But I just like literally consumed any information that I could possibly consume about making money and growing business and selling. And so I spent 5 years consuming information, not knowing what to do with this information. So when I stepped on the scale at 400 pounds, the only concepts that I understood was how to make money. And as silly as that sounds, 5 years later, over 5 years later, I still have not finished a book on fitness and health or running because it's boring. And it's so crazy that I look back, I'm like, how did I do this? And I still, I'm not a specific diet. I didn't start running. I just started with a walk around the block and the decision to portion control my food. And as silly as that sounds, I knew that if I cut enough calories out of my day and if I exercised enough, then I would lose weight. And that was all I cared about was at that time was just making sure that that number on the scale went down. And of course, over the past 5 years, my mindset has changed and my ideas of what health is have changed. But the only thing that I understood was numbers.
Right.
And I knew that if I just took enough action in the right direction, that something positive would happen. And I just happened to start with a walk around the block and portion controlling my food because that's all I understood at the time.
Right. And I think it's a major advantage for you, Gary, that you were into reading about business and self development because all of that really intertwines together, right? Just having that mindset of, you know, pushing through your comfort zones and, things like that. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, do you feel like that played a major role as you started to push yourself even more?
Absolutely. And having a business mindset about the whole thing is probably the number one reason I was able to succeed. And what I mean by that is, in business, you set goals, you take massive action, and you are persistent. I call it the GAP formula. You have your goals, your action, and your persistence. And everything can be boiled down to that, just finding out where you want to go and taking action to get there and overcoming adversity and failure until you get to the point that you want. So I understood the concept of getting there. It was just a matter of figuring it out on the way. And when I hit a stumbling block, I didn't look at it as, oh my gosh, I've lost, 30 pounds. It's time to stop, or, the scale stopped going down. So now I'm going to stop taking action. It was always, there's a plan in place. There's action you have to take. And it doesn't matter what the results are. You have to continue moving forward. So, if I stepped on the scale after having a perfect day of eating and I gained 4 pounds, I understood that, it's just a snapshot in time. I have to continue taking the action. And when I first started all of this, my goal was to just win the day, like eat good for the day, do my exercise for the day. And if I could do that, then I had a reward at the end of the day. And, my whole goal was to win the day and to, if I screwed up my eating or if I overate or if I missed my walk or whatever it might have been, it was not beat myself up, quit tomorrow. It was, okay, I had a bad day. Now I got to do it again tomorrow. And so I went from trying not to screw up 2 days in a row to trying to win 2 days in a row, and then trying to, put a winning streak together where I went from, 2 days in a row doing good to 3 days in a row doing it good. And then eventually I was like, what, if I can only miss one day, like if I can get 6 days, and then if I screw up on Sunday, forgive myself and start over again on Monday. And then I got to the point where I didn't, I got such a winning streak going where I didn't want to screw up. I would think about it halfway through the day and be like, oh man, I want to have a Snickers bar, but you know what? That kind of screws up my day. So I don't want to screw up this,
Right.
I've done so well for 8 days in a row. why would I screw it up over a Snickers bar? So I would, that's how I told myself no to the Snickers bar, as I justified it out of my diet instead of telling myself no.
Right. Like you really established that habit, which it's like, we hear it all the time as if you can get past like that 21 day point, right? That it really becomes a part of your lifestyle. But it's really true because then you don't want to take those steps to mess up what you've done. And then it just becomes who you are over time. And no, I love that, Gary. That's amazing. And so, I mean, your original plan was just to start walking, right?
I walked for a year. I went from 1 block to 2 blocks to 4 blocks took me 6 months, and I was walking about 5 miles a day. And it just became something that I look forward to. And then I eventually got to the point where I was listening to my personal development during my walk. And so now instead of having to use, an hour of my day of walking and then an hour of day of personal development, I put my hands together. So I was doubling my time. And my family would go on walks with me. And so there was health benefits to all of us. And at that time, there was relationship benefits to all of us. So I essentially was doubling my time by doing more than one thing, more than one positive thing. And all of that kind of springboarded this whole idea to move forward with walking in the health aspect. And I was seeing so many positive results just because I was doing these things every single day. That literally at one point in time, I just remember it wasn't even hard to watch the scale go down because I'd set all of these things up, and I just did so well at making them habits that I didn't miss walks. I spent time with my family. I was doing better at work because I was spending time developing myself personally for business. But I was also getting smarter. I was also getting fitter. I had more energy. I was sleeping less. I was a more productive person throughout the day, and that transferred into work. So I was able to be more productive at work as well.
Right. Because I mean, in sales, confidence is everything. And I mean, your confidence had to have been just like shooting through the roof, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was one of the shyest kids that graduated my high school. And so when I got into the car business, even though, I used to drink a lot in college and I became, loud and obnoxious. But there's that certain level where it's the alcohol talking, I guess. And so when I got into business, I essentially had to reteach myself and teach myself how to, interact with people. And I used to joke that my whole job as a car salesman was to take someone that hates my guts and turn him into my best friend and have them give me a check for $40,000, and I have 2 hours to do it. But really, that's what my job was, because everybody hates a car salesman because there's all sorts of stigmas out there.
Mm-hmm.
But by working on myself in all of these different ways, and I had so many repeat referral customers, they would come in and be like, they would give me encouragement. They're like, "Oh my God, Gary, you look so great, and you're doing so well, and you look so healthy. Keep going." That gave me some encouragement to continue on as well. So, I guess I put myself into the position where I had all of these positive things going for me, that it was kind of hard to stop.
Right. And like, when did the running part start? I mean, were you just like walking one day and it just felt right? Or like what made you want to start switching over to the running?
So it hit a point in my walking where I was in a position where, I could only walk for so many hours a day and so many miles a day, just more for time than anything. And my wife at the time had done the Couch to 5K program. And I had read a book called The Compound Effect, where the author, it's a business book, but the author talks about, building, like, essentially how to become a half marathon runner. And just by walking, you essentially just by running the same way that I started walking. So I was watching Nikki at the time, and she was doing really well. I mean, she would go in the backyard, and she literally wore a path in the backyard because she was embarrassed to be seen running in public. And I had the same fear when I started. That's why I started in the dark. But I just watched her, and I watched her succeeding, and I was like, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it. And so I literally, on a walk one day, it was early morning, it was dark. I went out for a walk and I said, you know what, today's the day. And I'll never forget it because it was a dirt road that was over by my house. And the reason I picked that dirt road is because I was like, nobody's going to be out here at this time in the morning, so nobody's going to see me, nobody's going to be able to judge me. And I started jogging the best that I possibly could, and I look up and there's some warehouse workers standing there smoking and joking off. And I don't know if they could see me or not, but all I could see in my head was them laughing at me. And I told myself, you can't quit. You have to just keep going until you get past them. And it was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And as soon as I got past them, I stopped running and I broke down and I cried for 2 miles home because I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't strong enough to run a block. And no matter how hard I had worked, I just wasn't strong enough to get there. And it was heartbreaking. And so I walked home in tears and shame, and I literally almost quit running that day. I was like, you know what, I can just walk. It's fine. And luckily I don't know why. The next day I went out and I tried it again, and I made it a little bit farther. And just because I guess I didn't quit, it springboarded me into a whole new section of life. But I almost quit that very first day.
Yeah, that's amazing though. Just the fact that you were, willing to, do the exact same thing the next day, even though that first day was so hard and obviously painful and just emotional. Like, no, that's amazing, Gary. So, you just kept doing it, right? Just day in, day out, just trying to get a little bit further, just like that compounding effect that you were talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. It was just, you start where you are and you go to where you want to be. And sometimes it takes longer than you want. It took me about a month to be able to go about a mile nonstop. And once I did that, once I had learned to essentially run a mile, I did all of that outside. And then I started going to, we got a membership at the rec center. And I remember getting on the treadmill when I could run a mile, and I would go like Monday, I would run a mile every day. And on Mondays, I would run a mile. And then Tuesdays, I would do 1.1 miles. And Wednesdays, I would do 1.2 miles. And Thursdays, 1.3. And Fridays, 1.4. And then the next week, I would go, I would start at 1.3, and I would slowly just move up a tenth of a mile every time. And I started playing with the elevation, and I started playing with the speed. And so every day I would move it up either 0.1 distance, or, like a 0.5% on the incline, or 0.1 on the speed. And slowly, over a couple months, I just got really, really good at running a mile. And I was doing a little bit more, a little bit faster every single day. And it took me, a long time. I want to say it took me like 3-4 months, but I had worked myself up to running 5 miles nonstop for the very first time. And I'll never forget it. It was Father's Day, and it was amazing. I just went out. It was a beautiful day, and I just said, I'm going to run 5 miles today. And I went and I did it.
That's awesome.
I just remember being so excited because it was this huge, huge accomplishment that I'd never dreamed was possible. And it's not like I just woke up one day and did it. I just put in a little bit more effort every single day, and just put myself in the position to be able to do it. And I enjoyed it. I remember smiling so big when I ran 5 miles that it was almost like there was nothing that was impossible because I ran 5 miles.
Right. And it's, obviously physically that's great as well, because you are going through a lot of weight loss and you're putting more stress on your body. As far as like avoiding injuries, obviously compounding like that over time is going to help you avoid that. Cause you haven't had any like major injuries, right?
So far I've been super lucky. A while back I did try to push things too hard, too fast. And I struggled with some IT issues, IT band issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into cross training and CrossFit and lifting weights and yoga, and all of those things seemed to help. But yeah, I look at myself today, and I was checking this morning. I'm at 265 miles for the month,
That's
and
awesome.
I feel phenomenal. It's kind of ridiculous that I feel this good.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Is it like you got that 5 miler straight through run? I mean, after you did that, were you feeling like you needed to sign up for any kind of race? Like, did you have just that competitive edge that you wanted to do that? Like, what really sparked doing the races?
Uh, the only reason that I signed up for my first half marathon is my wife at the time. She had signed up for one. That was her goal, was to run a half marathon. And the lady that she was going to run it with backed out on her, and she was so disappointed. And before I even thought about it, I just said, "Hey, I'll run it with you." And this was one of those things where I was like, "Shit, I don't even know what a half marathon is." And I said I would do it, and I guess that was my way of supporting her. And she looked at me and she's like, "Oh my God, you will." And so we did it. We didn't know anything about running. We didn't know anything about hydration. We didn't know anything about eating. We didn't know about any of this stuff. And so a week before the race, we went out. We were going to do. I think we were trying to do like a 10-mile run or something, and it was hot, and we didn't have water, and we hadn't eaten properly. And so I remember we barely made it 8 miles, and there was a lot of walking involved in it. And it was miserable. And we're like, do we really want to do this? And somebody told her, like, if you can make it 8 miles, you'll get in the atmosphere of a race, and there will be people cheering, and you'll just be able to finish the 13 miles. So
Hmm.
you can do 8, just go out, you can do 13. So we did the first 8 miles together, and at mile 8 she was struggling really bad, and she started walking, and she told me to go ahead, and I tried to stick around with her, and finally she was just like, "No, just go." And so I ended up running the last 5 miles. We ran it separately, and I kind of just, when I crossed the finish line, I just got this crazy high that I had never had before, this crazy feeling of accomplishment that I just ran 13 miles. And then after, it didn't take long to say, wow, if I can do 13, can I do 26? And it didn't take very long. And I decided that I was going to run a marathon. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
What was the time difference between the half and the marathon?
The half that I did was in October, and honestly, I don't remember exactly what the time was. It was like, I want to say it was like 2:45, 2:50 ish.
Gotcha. I mean, like the time frame. Like you did the one in
Oh,
October. Like when was the full marathon?
I did. So October was the half, and then the next May was the marathon. So there was a good solid time difference. And like, I guess that's one thing, is as fast as I've kind of sprung through these distances, it's not like I just went from a half marathon to a marathon, within 2 months, or,
Right.
I did go from a marathon to a 50K in like 30 days, but really that was, percentage wise, it isn't really that big of a jump. And then it took me from my first marathon to my first 50 was over a year. And then from my 50 to my first 100 was like 8 or 9 months. So I had these long drawn out, I guess drawn out is probably the wrong word, but I had these long training cycles where I taught myself how to just grow a little bit at a time, and I put in the time, and I let time and effort work for me, instead of just saying, what, I did a half marathon, I'm going to do a marathon in 2-3 months, and now I did a marathon, now I'm going to do a 50 in 2 or 3 months. And I contribute a lot of my success and a lot of my health to these long drawn out training cycles that I build over a long period of time, and I build in a smart way to keep myself healthy.
Right. What do you think was for you personally like the hardest part from going from the half to the full? Like, what was like your main challenges during the half compared to like your main challenges during the full, if that makes sense?
Um,
And it could be like mentally or physically or both.
I think the first half I was just on such an emotional high that I really didn't think about it. I just did it. And the last 5 miles, I just got so excited that I was still running at mile 10 and I was still running at mile 11. And then, you hit mile 12 and you're like, wow, I'm almost done. And, I can run a mile. And so I just got so excited that I don't remember there being many challenges on that first half. And then on the full, my longest training run was 24 miles. And so, going from 24 to 26 really wasn't that big of a deal. As far as anything, it was hot during my first marathons and I wasn't hydrated properly. And, my headphones died. That was pretty devastating because I was still with music.
Oh, it's awful.
And I got tired. Don't get me wrong. It's tiring running 26 miles, but I was able to do it, and I finished under 5 hours, which was my goal. And yeah, so I mean, I don't want to say there wasn't any challenges, but I dealt with most of my challenges especially for the marathon. I dealt with most of my challenges during training. So when I actually got into the marathon, it was fun. I had some fun, and it wasn't miserable.
That's cool. Yeah, I've had so many guests on that have done a lot of just running and ultra running, and almost everybody will say it's just just talk about how much running is like a form of meditation for them. Like it just has helped their mindset and their growth mentally just so much. Like how has that played a role for you as you're growing as a person constantly? You're obsessed with self-development. How has it really helped evolve your mindset and your growth over time?
That's a phenomenal question. It has helped me. So the actual fitness and health aspect of running has given me a level of energy that is kind of unbelievable. And what I mean by that is I make time to run, and when I have a schedule, I follow my schedule. But I make time to run, and when I run, it gets my mind flowing. And when I'm working, whether I'm writing or whether I'm reading or whatever it might be, when I run, like when I hit a stopping point, I'll go and I'll go for a run or I'll go for a walk or something, and that fresh air gets my mind flowing again. There was a point where I was using running as like a medication for life. It had become an addiction. I mean, really no different than food and alcohol had been an addiction for me. It was just something that I had to do every day. If I didn't run, I went crazy. And running had a rough relationship. But it was something that, again, I learned from those mistakes, and was able to transfer my lessons from running into business and into life in general. And so it's helped me with that as well. But I definitely agree that running is a really great form of meditation, because you can get out, for a 3, 4, 5, 6 hour run in the middle of the mountains, not have cell phone service,
Right.
and you can solve all the problems in life in 6 hours in the middle of the mountains.
Right. I mean, it's also, I think that plays, it can work kind of positive and negative, right? For some people, because a lot of the times people that want to, quit mid-run, it's not necessarily because they're physically tired. It's because they don't want to deal with the stuff that's running through their mind. Like they're almost talking themselves out of it, or just the bad stuff the negativity keeps popping up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I kind of, so quitting mid-run or something like that, it's something that I forced myself for a long time to say, if you say, and this is one reason that I set myself up to win is, if I'm going to run 1 mile, I have to run 1.1 miles. If I'm going to run 5 miles, I have to run 5.1 miles. So instead of saying, I have to run 5 miles and stopping at 4.8 because it's close enough, it's no, you have to go to 5.1.
I love
And
that.
so it was that same mentality that says you can only have this much food per plate, and you have to get out for a 1 mile run today, or a 1 block walk today, or whatever it might be. It's all of those same habits are so important, and they transfer into different areas of life. Like the same self-control that you have in the kitchen is the same self-control that helps you develop a habit of walking or running, and in turn is the same self-control that has you not walking and running when you're in a deep training cycle and it's your rest day. And, when you have to make sales calls at work, it's that exact same self-control, that exact same habit building process that you go through that keeps the proper amount of food on your table, keeps you in your training cycle, and makes you make those phone calls at work. It all works together, and it's all the same mental mind process.
Right. No, 100%. Super well said. You know, obviously you're doing, I mean, some crazy distances with your running, which is phenomenal considering, just where you started. I mean, is running like the 100 milers and the 50 milers, like, do you prefer those over some of the shorter distances, or do you have a preference at all?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, I don't prefer one or the other. It's pretty cool to say that you run 100 miles.
Right.
But it's also pretty cool that I can step out my door any day of the week and run a 4-hour marathon.
Yeah.
And that, like, as cool as that is, after I failed my 100 in August, I had, like I said, I had this weird, love-hate relationship with running, and I was using running for a lot of the wrong reasons. I made a promise to myself that I was going to find my smile and my love for running again, because I really do. I love going to the mountains, and I love just getting lost and just hitting trail after trail after trail. And when I get tired, it's time to find my way home. Yeah, I would prefer just to get lost in the mountains and just go out and hang out with friends and just go see beautiful mountaintops and take pictures. It's been a big goal of mine, and I'd like to say that I've succeeded at it, because I do spend a lot of time in the middle of the mountains, sometimes by myself and sometimes with friends. And training for my 100 this year, since I failed at mile 69 last year, I'm kind of doing my 100 just to prove to myself that I can do it. And last year, my only goal was to get to the finish line of Leadville and to celebrate. And this year, I have a whole different mentality that I'm enjoying every mile that gets me to the starting line. And once I get to the starting line, the rest is going to be what it is. And I'm just going to put myself in the best possible position that I can to finish the race in the best time that I can. But I'm not in this only to get to the finish line and only to get to the belt buckle this year. I'm doing it for the pure fact that I enjoy being in the middle of the mountains. And by changing my mindset on all of that, it's changed my mindset on life. And it's kind of weird, but it's kind of a mindfulness, be in the moment and do what you can today and enjoy it as much as you can mindset.
What happened? What happened at the race last year?
Oh, what didn't happen at the race last year? So in July of last year, I had a 18-month, 24-month span of life that just pretty well sucked. I made a lot of choices that were not great. I was drinking. I had an alcohol problem. I had a life problem, and I was going through a major depression. My life as I knew it had fallen apart with the weight loss and the extreme running. And my wife at the time, her and I had separated and eventually got divorced. And a lot of those things just kind of all hit me at one time. And I had hit this depression last July. I was ready to just climb to the top of a mountain and jump off. And one morning I woke up and I sat down to write a suicide note. And thankfully I wrote kind of a personal journal, I guess you would call it, instead of a suicide note. And then I couldn't get out of bed. I was sleeping 12 hours a day. I could barely function. I couldn't get out my bed to walk, let alone run. And so when I showed up in Leadville, I was probably in the worst place mentally that I'd ever been in. 2 nights before the race, I went out and I ended up going to a party and got drunk and ended up getting high and passed out on the floor. And so 2 nights before the biggest race of my life, I guess I'm treating it like it's Vegas.
Right.
And
Just self-sabotaging, basically.
yeah, pretty much. So, I mean, I drank 3 pints of Fireball in the first 69 miles of Leadville. It was awful. I hadn't prepped my crew properly. It was almost like I didn't even want to be there. I didn't treat it. I didn't respect it. The more I've reflected back on that time period of my life, I've gone back through my personal journals, and I'm still trying to put a lot of the pieces together. But it's so weird to say, but the best thing that's ever happened to me is not finishing that race, because I've learned more from the failures of that race than I ever would have learned from finishing that race.
Yeah.
And I realized how much of a disaster my life was because I failed at that race. And I kind of look at it as, I'm so happy that I quit that race, because if I would have finished that race, I was going to realize that race really didn't mean anything, as far as it wasn't going to fix my life. I guess for the longest time, I was like, you know what, I'm going to finish this race, and I'm going to be able to put my family back together, and I'm going to start enjoying work after this is done, and I'm going to be able to start enjoying running again. And I think I realized at one point that this race wasn't going to fix anything in my life. And so I guess I saw the disappointment ahead of time, so I was able to learn from it with failure. If I would have finished, I'm actually scared that I might have jumped off of a mountain, because it didn't fix everything that I thought it was going to fix.
Yeah.
And it's so weird to think about. But my biggest failure turned out to be one of the best learning experiences I've ever had. And I still reflect back on, that part of my life. And I was in a very bad spot, but I'm so happy that it happened, because I've been able to learn so much. And because of all of that, I quit drinking, and I've found my smile again, and I've found a whole new life through those terrible experiences. And it's weird to say, but without those negatives, I wouldn't have all the positives I have today.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's amazing, Gary, that you've been able to overcome all of that, and just to be able to share your story, because I know you're reaching a lot of people that may be going through that and haven't, that are kind of privately going through that. And then, people that hear your story can resonate and give them hope that they can just completely transform their life around.
Yeah. Completely transforming your life is a byproduct of the small steps that we take every single day. And it's one of the hardest things to get people to understand. And I'm all for setting big goals. I'm all for having big dreams and taking big action. But the thing that I tried to do was I tried to cheat time, and I tried to do things before I was ready. And I forgot that it is truly the process of doing all of these things that makes a difference in the end. And when I forgot that, and I tried to cheat time, and I tried to do more than was physically possible, that's when everything fell apart. And as soon as I started to force things, and it turned, like the universe just turned on me and said, nope, you don't get to have total control. The only thing that you can control is your daily actions. Right. I'll take care of everything else. And so that's one thing that I just want to stress with everybody, whether it's, whether you step on the scale at 400 pounds and you just want to get healthy, or whether you want to, whether you're just starting your walking or you're running and you want to run a marathon or a 50 or 100, or, whether you're starting a business, or, whether it's transforming your family from, a rough place to something even better, is the only thing that we can do is focus on that daily action. And we can't force the results. The results are just going to come. And I kind of have an analogy of, you can't smother a spark into a bonfire. And so many times we get this spark, but we try to smother it, and we're like, we want it to grow so damn bad into a bonfire that we end up smothering it, and then we got to start all over again. And so, you have to start a fire with a spark, and then you have to ease it, let it grow. And the more that you grow it, the more fuel that you put on there, the bigger it grows. But it takes time to get that fire started. And just like anything that we want to do in life, it starts with a spark, but you gotta gently pull that spark into a bigger fire, and eventually you can turn it into a bonfire.
I love that. No, that's perfect, Gary. And Gary, who influences you? Who inspires you that really just helps keep you going?
Um, a bunch of dead people. So my favorite author ever is a guy named Napoleon Hill. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. He's written more books than I can even count, and I read Think and Grow Rich 4 times a year. I've probably read it 50 plus times. And then he has some other books that I read and I study constantly. And through him, he developed, or through his teaching and writing, he has inspired some other people. But one of my other favorites is Jim Rohn, who Jim Rohn's mentor was Napoleon Hill. And then, of course, Jim Rohn was the mentor to people like Tony Robbins and Darian Hardy. And so through all of these people, this philosophy has been put into place, and then it's grown, and more psychology has been added to it. More ideas have been added to it. So I study all of these millionaires, billionaires, in business, and through all of those people, I've been able to get inspired. I met a guy named Grant Cardone.
Yeah,
in the October.
I like him.
Yeah, he's my favorite. I got to meet him October of 2012. Cool. I was at a social media conference in Vegas, and I went to his seminar. It was an hour-long, lights-out seminar. I couldn't even take notes because I was so engaged. And awesome. I told myself, I'm gonna walk up to this guy, and I'm just gonna say hi and shake his hand. And so I did. I walked up and I shook his hand, and the guy spent 120 seconds with me. And it was awesome. 120 seconds that I would not give back for $1 billion. But through that, and then after I had my 2 minutes with him, I stood back and I just watched how he interacted with people. And I watched the glow on his face. I watched the glow on people's face when they talked to him. I watched how he interacted with them, and I watched the energy that this guy had. Like, he took energy and he gave it to every single person that he interacted to. And I said, I want to be just like that guy. And so I ran back to my hotel room and I wrote down all of the things that I could remember from the seminar. And I remember I wrote down on an index card, I wrote down all of my goals. And when I stepped on the scale at 400 pounds 5 months later, I had all of these things in my head, and then I had what he had given me, and I had this idea of what this energy, like I told myself, if you can just get this energy, you can do whatever you want. And so that was one of my driving forces, was I wanted to be like Grant Cardone, and I wanted to have the energy that he has. And when I wake up in the morning, I kind of feel like Grant Cardone some days. I feel like I can take any energy, turn it into positivity, and just give it away. And there's no shortage of energy. There's no shortage of positivity. And I think by having that mindset where I don't have to keep all of this stuff in, I can give it away, because the more I give away, the more I'm going to create within myself, has given me a light that I can transform myself and help other people transform themselves, just by transferring this energy around. And I know that's all weird. And
no, it's not at all. I totally understand, and I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, no, Grant's energy is amazing, and I love that. And so Gary, what are some things that you're working on in the future? I know you mentioned Leadville, but is there anything coming up that you just want to put out there and share with people?
As far as running, Leadville 100 that's my goal. That's all my focus on running, is to get me there. My whole training program, I cut out all of my long distance running from January through April, just to get faster. I needed to get faster and stronger, and I ended up cutting some weight, which has been really helpful. And then I got super fast. So I've only had a couple races, and they're all the races that I have are designed to get me to the Leadville 100. which is in August. And then in September, I'm doing the Alaska Marathon. I was invited to speak for their spaghetti dinner, so I'm going to go run the Kenai Marathon up there. So I'm excited about that. I quit all of my other jobs, and I do Run Epic, which is my coaching and speaking company 100% now. So I spend my day on the phone talking to lovely people, helping them transform their life. And I'm writing every day, and I'm reading every day, and running most every day. So
that's cool. Do you have a book out, or are you currently working on one?
I would love to write a book if I could ever get my thoughts organized enough.
You should do it. You should do it. And whenever you do, let me know, because obviously I'll promote on my end as well.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, it's that thing where I just got to build the habit to write a little bit every day.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. No, I love that, Gary. And Gary, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media, and then any websites that you have? That way people can keep up with everything that you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I try to keep up with a blog at outrunyourexcuses.com. I also have my professional website at GaryStotler.com. You can hit me up on my regular Facebook page, just Facebook / Gary Stotler 78. Or I have a running page that's Outrun Your Excuses, Facebook / Outrun Your Excuses. And then I'm Outrun Your Excuses on Instagram. Instagram's my favorite. That's where I spend most of my time hanging out online. So
perfect. Yeah, I'll put all of those in the show notes. That way people can just go click and add you. And Gary, just a closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
One piece of advice. That is a phenomenal question. One piece of advice would be to take one step forward. It doesn't matter if you're in the best time of your life. It doesn't matter if you're in the worst time of your life. You don't have to see the end. You just have to see the beginning. And the beginning starts with one step. And it doesn't matter how small that step is. It doesn't matter how slow that step is. It just has to be that one step in the right direction. And I always tell people that it took me 145,000 steps to finish 100 miles. But the same size step that got me off of my couch at 400 pounds was the same size step that got me across the finish line at my 100-mile race. I just had to teach myself how to take a few more of those steps and take them together. And I've pulled myself out of the depths of hell. I've put myself in some of the best positions I've ever been. But it's never been a hop. It's never been a jump. It's never been a leap. It's always just been one step at a time, whether it's facing adversity, whether it's facing failure, or whether it's facing success. Everything we do in life is one step at a time. And I know, as cliche as it is, you can't take two steps at one time. We all take the same step forward. So you just take that one step, and then you just get really, really, really good at taking that one step. And eventually those steps add up to 145,000 steps and across the 100-mile finish line. So it doesn't matter what your goal is, just take it one step at a time and be patiently persistent, and do not give up until you get to where you want to go.
That's perfect, Gary. No, 100%. And I love that. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you. And I can't wait to see all that you've accomplished, because I know you're going to help so many people. So just thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you so much for having me. I love it. Yeah, if I can help with you, or if anybody that's listening, if I can do anything for you, please reach out. I'll do anything that I possibly can to help you get you going in the right direction.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Gary. He's doing so much positive work, so be sure to give him a follow on social media to keep up with everything that he's been working on. You can find his social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Gary's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Gary, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson to learn more about how you can support the Unlock Wellness podcast. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.